Welcome to episode 160, March 3rd, 2023. Held for a Moment, a healing connection after loss with Layla. This episode is about an experience of pregnancy loss, light communication, and healing upon the path towards parenthood. I have a special guest here, and those that are tuning in to Spirit Baby Radio, there's an audio as always, but we're actually going to be offering a YouTube video to just, share the book and talk more. And so you can go and visit that as well. And so my special guest, Leah Mele-Bazaz, is the author of Layla Held for a Moment, a memoir. She earned her MFA in creative writing at Drexel University, where she also teaches English. And I laugh because, we talk about your name. I'm like, don't butcher her name. Don't butcher her name.
You accidentally called me Layla instead of Leah, but
Oh
that's
my
totally
gosh. There you
okay.
go. Do you get that a lot?
Not too often, but I enjoy hearing her name. So
Aw,
you
yeah,
can call
yeah.
me
It's
Layla.
so funny because earlier my husband's like, I showed him the book and he goes, don't call her Layla. And I'm like, okay. Like he already planted the seed. Like,
Yeah.
don't, and then I do it. Aw,
No, I
yeah.
like
And
hearing her
so
name.
there
So
we go. Yeah, she's got a beautiful name. And I want to show this beautiful book. I was just talking about the cover here. And this is, look at that. And thank you so much for being here.
thank you.
And
And back to the cover, if you want to hold it up again, I actually included names of babies. So you'll see
oh, is that here?
Yep. So you'll see along the line, my friends' babies who have passed away, or people I've met through different organizations who wanted their baby name on the cover. So some people have seen their baby's name on the cover, even
Oh.
just by coincidence. So that's been making it extra special too.
I love that. You know what's so funny? I never even noticed that. How come I didn't notice that?
We have it.
Because it's letters and words and I ignore them apparently. That's such a beautiful tribute. I know I see. Let's tribute some love, light energy here. I see TJ, I see Hazel, Lola, the Destiny, Catherine, Torvi, maybe,
Yeah.
Naomi, Oak. That's so beautiful. I really love that. Yeah, I'm glad that you pointed that out.
It's so
And
funny that you started with TJ because that's my friend's baby who we've connected on social media. And I always see signs from him. Like his
uh
sign is a smiley face. So I'll send my friend pictures of the smiley faces I see throughout the day. I'm like, oh, TJ's saying hi. It seems like he communicates a lot more to me than Layla does. So it's just, it's funny
that
how I
happens.
said his name first. Yeah. He's a
And
very,
and yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And I know the heartache of having, to create and share the story. And I always like to share how we met. And so I know we met in the Facebook group, The Afterlife of Spirit Baby. And I think you posted that you had a book, and I was like, wait a minute, I want to know everybody's stories and what they're sharing. And it's not a book, of course, that we inspire to write, right? I mean, it's like it's a story of your own loss, and I want to hear more about what I want to hear about a lot of things actually.
yeah.
And there's a lot we're going to talk about. And so I want to hear just hmm, why write the book, and what the experience was with losing your daughter.
Yeah, so when I found out Layla had passed, I was at my, routine visit. It was almost the start of the third trimester. So I was supposed to do the diabetes test afterwards and kind of get all of that stuff running. Um, Very unexpectedly, we found out there's no heartbeat. And when I got into the hospital and they were going to induce me, I was like, I'm never going to write about this. I'm never going to speak about this. My great grandmother lost her daughter, and I know that we never talked about it growing up. So I felt like in order to be strong, I had to hide my loss. And then very quickly, I got home from the hospital and realized that I I really felt like I wasn't going to be able to survive without her. And my way of feeling less alone was to share my story. that felt like the only way I could actually survive. I experienced a lot of suicidal thoughts, things like that. So being able to write my way through it was pretty much like my saving grace there. And then hearing from other families now who've been impacted by the book is just very fulfilling.
Yeah, I had a moment where I was like, it's interesting. I wonder what touches people in the story, right? Because it's different for everybody. But there was a part in the book where, and I guess because I'm not that I'm getting to that age, but when the grandmother was like, had her own grieving and emotion, an experience about loss. And I'm trying to remember which chapter it was, but I suddenly just was like in tears and I was like, I was like, oh, and I think it was really, my surprise was, oh, that's because that could be you someday, right? I'm like, my children's children. I never really thought about that. And so I
Mhm.
really felt that. It really like hit me. And, it's not, of course, it's a book that's tragedy and sad, but yet, I could see on the journey how you're, being honest about living life without her. And that's a whole other experience. And it is very vulnerable. And of course, inspiring in the sense that others have gone through it as well. Maybe can't articulate, right? That
Mhm.
conversation. But tell me more. Tell me about Hilda. I was like very curious. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, so she just I guess everybody thinks their great grandmother, if they had the chance to meet them, is amazing, but she was wonderful, and she lived until 102. So and she really had like all of her wits about her. She would do crossword puzzles every day, stuff like that. But she kind of always carried this grief about her daughter, and it was very taboo. We didn't, never asked. We didn't want to upset her. We did visit the graves on her birthday, but it was definitely a very hushed topic, and I always felt nervous to ask her in fear of upsetting her. And when the tables turned and I went through my own loss, I realized that like I always want the chance to talk to somebody about Layla. So kind of realizing that grief she carried and how she carried it and how heavy it was. And really finding that release when I was able to carry my grief, but also share it with others. um, it ended up being just kind of a full circle moment, and it really made me think about the grief we carry each generation, and how I handle my grief can help inspire others to speak about their own journey.
Yeah, I was really touched by that opening, hearing about Hilda. I know she's sprinkled throughout here and there. And what you say is very valuable. And I hear this a lot in the bereavement community is that the suppression of the experience, like it feels really sad that a mother can't talk about her child that died
Hmm.
because whatever the kind of tradition is in the culture or and it still happens now. I see it a lot now when women are coming to me in group space or more individual, they feel like sometimes their family abandons them. And I wouldn't even say that. I would say it's more of they're just fear and they're scared.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
people all grieve differently. But I almost feel like you get to have moments where you feel like, oh, like I see you, Hilda, like I see you that you couldn't, be with your child all this life. Because even as you talk about her, I feel like her energy come up here too, by the
Yeah.
way. with
Oh
a
yeah.
with a few children next to her.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's like sharing with you, like, look at all these children and then everything's good. And
Yeah.
um, you probably get those experiences too.
She's my mom actually, she's in denial that she has a lot of abilities that we share. But she has these very vivid dreams, and one was about Hilda taking care of Layla in a NICU. I think I wrote about it in one of the passages, and it always felt like she has been a guide for me, kind of bridging that. I don't know if I call it an afterlife. It just seems like another form of life there.
Mm,
um, I don't know how to describe it, but it feels like it just like a different. Maybe you feel similarly, but it feels like another whole like universe out there, um,
mm-hmm.
where our loved ones are, and it it seems like she's been taking care of Layla and kind of helping mother her in my absence. And recently, my own grandmother passed away, and one of the things she saw when she was about to pass was um, a little girl came up to her and gave her a blanket in her dream. And my mom says, "Oh, like what little girl?" And she goes, "Well, Leah's baby." Um,
Um,
so yeah, so we think that Layla was kind of helping her out along the way for her transition too.
yeah, and let's again, I know, excuse me, there's so much to talk about, but I want to hear, we're kind of going into this connection of your own abilities and your connection, and that I'm very curious about. Because you talk a little bit here in the book, but I want to hear more. Maybe there's another book that wants to come out. I don't know. Maybe I'm pushing on you
I
because I
know.
want to hear about the connection. Let me look in this page. Let me see what it is about. Oh, here it is. Let's see, it's chapter 8. You talk about, ah, I can't shake that voice. Your baby has died.
Hmm.
And I need to give my OB/GYN a call, but I feared I'd sound like a lunatic, right? Hi there, a voice in my head says my baby died. Can I move my appointment to today? Of course, being kitschy, but also really questioning. What was that experience like for you to feel? Would you say that's more of a clairvoyant, clairsentient experience?
It felt like it. And it's the way sometimes when I hear things that don't feel like it's on this like plane, it has like a vibrating sound. Like when I was younger, I used to wake up from dreams and I would hear people talking and would have this like ring to it. And that's how that voice sounded like. It sounded like a message that was like woo, shaking through. Um, and I was like, well, that's not my own
Mm,
thought, but that sounded like a message. And I think what made the journey so difficult was having that voice of intuition throughout it. Of course, I, tried my best to not listen to it because I was scared that something was wrong. And it was just a very strange, I had I talked about some anxiety during the pregnancy, and I just kept thinking something was wrong, and I would try to ignore it. And it was just kind of this battle of my intuition where it was like, I recently got trained in enhancing my intuition. I'm like, how do I shut this off?
oh, wow.
So it was just, and it actually was something that I thought about removing from the book because I was like, who's gonna want to read a story like this? Somebody once told me in a writing workshop, they're like, well, I wouldn't believe a superstitious narrator. And that kind of always stuck with me. I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't include this voice, but then I realized it was so important to my journey and it wouldn't be the whole picture if I didn't include that voice. Because a lot of it too can go back to guilt. If I felt like something was wrong, why didn't I act sooner? So
Mm.
just this like reckoning with intuition that I kind of pulled together throughout the story, and then um, ways to turn that intuition back on after the loss, because the first thing I wanted to do was see my daughter. So it's kind of like this whole journey of, listening to that instinct you have and kind of opening up to these other messages that we can get from our babies who aren't here.
And that's a really hard place to go. And I did a podcast many years ago with a woman who was very psychic. And she had a stillbirth and she had like different feelings come up right before, especially. But she was like you say, like, is it intuition? Is it fear? Because fear is very persuasive and fear can be very powerful. And yet, I know a lot of women that do have a lot of fear in pregnancy, like even with death and questioning that. And sometimes I even wonder, someone once said to me, it was a clinical grief psychologist said, well, if you think about death when you're pregnant, and I don't agree with this. She's like, that means, doesn't mean the baby's going to die. It means that something happened to you.
Hmm.
She made it sound like it wasn't normal. I thought it was normal because I thought about it with both my children, especially my firstborn. I'm
Yeah.
like, is that not normal? And I'm like, I feel like I've talked, and maybe some people it's not, but I was also born into grief. So then I think there could be an energy in there. You talk about ancestral connections, like the generations, but something, I'm very curious about when I hear people, say these things. And so, but of course, if it gets more obsessive, right? then you're
Mhm.
like, oh, is this fear? Is this intuition? And I think it's like, and maybe you even felt you questioned things in the second pregnancy, right? You
Oh,
may have, yeah, a lot.
yeah, it was a mess.
Yeah, I see a lot of women that come into the space with me, and there's a certain energy that you now you see through a different lens, and it's okay to be hyper vigilant. It's okay to be fearful to a degree, right? And
Mhm.
so when you were listening, I always feel like even when you were just sharing that to me, I do feel like all of us are timeline travelers, whether we're aware of it or not. We do go into the future. Some people are more tuned in, but I do feel like we all do that because time is not really relevant.
Mhm.
And so we've created in this consciousness a belief system, and even something else you said about superstition.
Mhm.
Like, oh, is this, oh my God, what a, like, it's, superstition, skepticism, doubt. It's like, okay, whatever. Um, it's going to be there, but I wouldn't even consider that superstitious, but I could see why someone else would pin it as that. Yeah, I love these conversations about, children. Um, like you're tuning in, in between worlds of energy, we can even say, or as we were saying, it's just right here. But of course, it's a different frequency
Mhm.
and to tune back into that. So talk more about that. So then you are coming back to tuning in.
Yes, I feel part of the tuning in was writing the book, if that,
That makes
yeah,
sense.
it felt like I was able to um, write and almost kind of channel the story through the grief. And then ultimately, recognizing that a lot of the things that used to scare me about, like that voice of intuition, like they don't even bother me anymore. During my second pregnancy, I was seeing a lot of different kinds of things. And, I would wake up and see maybe a figure at the side of the bed. And what used to scare me, I would just be like, and I would roll over. So um, I feel like a lot of that fear I used to have around intuition has gone because I know that intuition can also help bring me back to my daughter and be open to those messages and things like that. Um, but yeah, I think that ultimately something that used to scare me, how intuition used to be a place of fear, is now kind of a place of comfort and something that I enjoy tuning into.
Yeah. So tell us more about, let me see, I'm curious. So what is your communication like with her in the beginning? And then what is it now? Has it evolved? Has it changed?
Yeah, it's so the communication in the beginning, like I used to there was one moment, like maybe the day after my loss, where I saw her, like she was a baby and I woke up from a dream and I saw her like pretty much floating over me. And that I was startled because it was kind of right
Yeah.
in my face. And, I was a little scared. And then kind of understanding that, like, then when I would go time periods without dreams of her, then I would, want that. So it was kind of like being, I think, again, like talking about the place that used to scare me has now been like a way to connect. There was a point where I realized that I shouldn't think of her as a baby anymore. I'm like, wait a second, she's turning 5
Mm,
this year. Like, I can almost see her be like, okay, I'm not a baby anymore. Like, I'm 5, and it kind of felt like she's developing, and like it hit me that like she's growing, and she is kind of having that. If that makes any sense, like it feels like she's not like the little baby anymore. She's now like a child, and we grew up on different kind of planes and things like that. But her communication definitely feels different now. Her symbol's an elephant, so I know that I live in the city, so it's very hard to see actual elephants anywhere
right.
besides the zoo. Um, but signs from her I will get, especially when I am, in a moment of stress or sadness. There's this truck that I see around the city. It's some type of moving truck, but it has an elephant on it. So that'll pass by. Um, when my rainbow baby, when she was eligible to go to daycare, and I was really nervous about it. One of her first weeks, she came back with a bib that said, "Hi, mommy," and it was an elephant.
Ah,
So they're like, "Oh, you can keep the bib. Like, she spit up on it today, so you can just bring it." But like that was also a very special message because, she's we think of her as that elephant symbol. So it's definitely
mm.
sometimes it's very direct and sometimes it's just that little like passing sign. Um, but it definitely has shifted over the years.
Yeah, and it's a big deal. The big 5 year mark. Every year is a big year. I know that because there's so many things that come up. But even something, what were you saying about sometimes in the really tragedy of grief, we can get communication, and this is the thing that people think we don't. Like you can be in deep, heavy levels of grief. Of course, there's certain I feel like degrees of it. Like if the emotion is so intensified, there's still that light energy that comes through. So you are probably seeing her, right, come to you and it's like, whoa, what's happening? And I think I want to say that because I know people that are tuning in that you can have deep grief and still have light communication. You can still
Mhm.
be because that psychic energy, that space, it can be, we can create obstacles and blocks emotionally, but it doesn't have to be the excuse. Like, okay,
Mhm.
well, look, and I think a rainbow.
I was
There
just
you
about
go.
to say that. I was like, there's a rainbow on your
There
head
you
right
go.
now.
I know. I just noticed that in the one in the reflection. And
Yeah,
so, but
I've
the
been
but
seeing
that
it.
world is very rich in energetic symbolism. And you saw the elephant, you saw the bib. That's not an accident. That's not a
Yeah.
coincidence. Like it's like, oh, are you listening to the way that messages can be expressed? Because I do feel with some people, they may feel like, okay, baby, come here, I want to see you, but then you get startled or
Hmm.
we go into like, oh, it's in my head, I'm making it up, right? But then it's like, okay, then you're totally missing everything, right?
Yeah.
And something else you said is that, and I don't think it's odd or strange that souls do evolve. And
Hmm.
yes, there's an agreement within the earth realms that she's your daughter and a child. And
Hmm.
so you get to perceive her and connect with her any way you want. You know what I'm saying? I've seen children come to me as adult. They're like, Kelly, I'm like 20 years old now. And I'm like, okay. And it's really certain people are okay with that language. Some people are not.
Yeah.
They just feel, but there is evolution, like you said, on a soul level. So you perceiving her as this more grown energy, I think there's something in that, just to like validate that for you, you know?
Yeah. Thank you. It's funny
Uh,
that the rainbow popped up over your head as you were
I
talking.
know. It's
Yeah.
just that, that's my world, by the way. This is like my everyday. You heard some of these stories, you'd be like, how did that just happen? Like,
Yeah.
even I mean I could should share the story. So talk about intuition, right? So yesterday, I hike with my boys a lot and I hear other people's intuition sometimes when they don't or they don't
Mhm.
acknowledge it. So this was really, really just I want to say it blew me away, but it made me really stop and reflect. So we go to a hike and it's closed. I'm like, okay. I was like, I'm not like, oh, I should have known, but I had a lot of mental energy yesterday. And that can be like, if we're like thinking, we're not really tuning in, kind of feeling. So then I'm like, okay, we had to go to this other hike. And I was like, oh, this will be great. So we park a little early. We're walking and the kids are fine. They'd always love hiking. And then all of a sudden we get to this tree, let's take a break. And they're like, I don't want to go. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't want to go? They don't really ever say that. But when they both said it, I went, huh, I'm like, oh, there's something in that. Like, I can't, maybe another parent would say, oh, we're just going to go anyways. And I think you have to balance it out. Sometimes you have to go, okay, we're going to push forward. But as we were hiking, and it's not snake weather yet, but I kept talking about a snake, because that's me time traveling, not knowing, but knowing, because I'm like
Yeah.
speaking about it. And then I'm like, let's keep an eye out. And I'm like, it's not even snake time. And so right before they're like, we don't want to go, we don't want to go, there's a huge rattlesnake on the trail and it like slithers by and it's kind of in an area where I'm like, I'm sure it moved forward, but the kids were kind of nervous and you couldn't really see. But then I was like, is this a moment where my children had an intuitive connection of not moving forward? And then I kept talking about a snake the whole time, which I never do. And this is what I'm telling you. My life's like, okay. And then I was like, okay, we'll turn back. And then I was really thinking, I saw my children's intuition even when they didn't maybe know it, right?
Mhm.
They just knew, and then my husband, I told him the story and he goes, well, what if you pass the snake and something weird happens? I'm like, that could be true too. But the conviction of their energy, I was like, I can't just ignore it, right?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna like, okay, we'll just walk down the part of the trail. Then we ended up going to the beach so we can get that like I wanted to get the energy out with
Yeah.
them. And then it made me go, wow, like they didn't even really they knew it, but they didn't know it, you know?
Hmm.
So, just talking about intuition and sometimes I feel like we can recognize other people's intuition, but also
Hmm.
sometimes we don't really have to like we know but we don't know. You know that feeling of like,
Hmm.
oh, and then you see the after, like, oh, okay. And that's normal, by the way. I know people are probably tuning and going, wait, is that normal? That's okay. I think when we're in a really easeful, calm place in our existence, then we can allow these different experiences to come up in our everyday life. And we
Hmm.
can we can live in completely unaware of it. I mean, but I don't know. I don't think that's fun,
Yeah.
you know? Because then you're like missing out on all the fun things like, oh, look how cool this is. Um, but yeah, so let's tell me more. Tell me more. I'm gonna look through the book right now. Like, what more do you want to share about your story and this connection with your daughter?
I think that one thing I enjoyed writing about in the story was our plant.
Oh yeah.
So it was so interesting how our plant, we had this plant that we took care of in the story, and I was watering the plant, even though it doesn't really need water, but I was watering it when I had that voice that went through, that intuitive voice saying something has happened. Your baby has died. And I just remember looking at the plant, and then flash forward, I'm getting induced. My husband goes home to pack some of our like last minute belongings to go to the hospital, and he sees the plant, and the plant used to have three branches and one of the branches had fallen, and we used to say the branches were mom, dad, and baby. um, and my husband, he didn't tell me until maybe a few days later, but he's like, one of Ernie's plants, one of his stumps is gone. And it was just so interesting how that plant, throughout, had kind of been such a symbol for us. Um, so I always like talking. A lot of my friends who have read the book, they're like, "How's Ernie doing?" We call the plant Ernie. He didn't make it this long, but it's just funny what people connect to. And I know during the pandemic too, a lot of people started getting plants. So I feel like his character ended up becoming something that people could connect to, which was kind of fun to write about a plant.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful with nature, right? It's because that plant is kind of thriving in its own way that you cannot control, really.
Mhm.
Well, you can water, you can give sun, but what if the plant has its own connection to how its roots are growing? Or,
Mhm.
it reminds me even we can look at the spirit of a child, like a soul that has their own plan that we may never fully understand, especially when there's loss. And I know a lot of people always want the answer. Give me the answer. Tell me the reason. And I always like to tell people, what if there's many reasons?
Mm,
What if there's many reasons? And
yeah.
it's not to the point that, oh, you're a bad person, you've done something wrong, or whatever the self cane that we create. It's more, and I know you understand that kind of this connection to this other level of consciousness. It's like, well, what is this? And it's good to reflect. We have to reflect. What does it all mean? And then I like to tell people to be curious, right? It's like, but I love that, the connection with the plant. And you said Ernie is where is it? You said Ernie's not here anymore.
He's not.
Yeah.
I won't give away the ending of the book, or should I? About it, like, kind of ends
No,
this.
we don't have to give it. No, look, don't, we'll go give it away. We'll let people
Okay.
come read the
But
book. Yeah.
yeah, people will see Ernie at the end of the book.
There you go. There
And
you
that was
go.
one of my favorite passages to write.
Hmm.
But yeah, Ernie's no longer around, but he has been kind of a treasure from that book. A lot of people
Oh, I
keep
know.
in
I'd love to.
memory.
Yeah, I'd love to see like, yeah, it's like, what do people like about you? What do people connect with? Like I said, I really connected when grandma was talking. I was like, oh, I was like, wow. I was like, why is that hitting me? I can't remember which page it was, but it just was like it's because I feel like the loss, of course it hits you and your husband really deeply, right? But it also affects other people, it
Mhm.
ripples outward and everyone has a different connection with your energy, with her energy, and then the healing journey begins, right? And I know there was a lot you shared around grieving, and you had some really, I mean, to put it lightly, dark times, but really at the bottom of the barrel, maybe, and just not knowing where you would come up, right?
Mhm.
You talk a little bit about, and I know, it sounds like activity, moving energy
Mhm.
was a lot of, maybe you can even offer something for those tuning in that have had loss, early loss like that, later loss, I don't know how you want to call it. Um, yeah, what was your saving your heart, to bring you like to be a part of this world and to bring healing or, energy to because you have to be here.
Yeah, one thing that helped a lot was running. I realized that I was able to start to feel a connection with Layla. Wasn't able to see her when I was running, but I could feel her. And it felt like she was guiding me to run. And one thing I start to do in the book is not do like a couch to 5K, but a couch to marathon program.
Mm,
Um, and I just kind of was consumed with running and being outside and um, connecting, getting that runner's high and kind of like feeling her with me. I was very slow at running, but I kind of just trudged along and it was a source of comfort. And I did a trail race that really like helped me kind of connect with her and really inspired me to keep going longer and longer. And getting to that marathon distance was, um, it wasn't pretty. It was, looking back, a very bad race, but it was also so special where I felt like, I was doing this for her and I was able to do something I didn't ever think I could do. And that really gave me that sense of life purpose again.
mm,
Even if it's just something like getting outside and going for that walk, but like you're doing it and you're breathing and you're feeling the sun on your face. And like I've met a lot of other moms who, maybe their thing was knitting or doing puzzles, like something that's kind of it's relaxing you and it's also like fostering that connection. And it might take some different tries, but I definitely tried a lot of other things that weren't healthy for me during the grieving process. So once I realized, okay, now it's time to do something healthy and
mm.
find something that's working for me, and running was one of my ways of really kind of getting myself out of that rut. And there's always this saying of, you shouldn't run from your problems. And I found that the opposite, because when you're on the trail and you're running like 15 miles, you're with your problems. And,
Good point.
and it was just something that like, it really helped me go through and it helped me experience life again. So, that felt like a big source of connection with her.
And I feel like running, I've tried running years and years ago, and I'm just not good at it. It's probably the hardest thing to do, to be honest,
Yeah.
for your body and cardio. I put that neck and neck with backpacking. Carrying a load in high altitude. I'm like, no, don't sign me up.
Yeah.
But I remember that feeling. It is a really good feeling, and especially when you keep getting stronger. And I
Hmm.
would say it's funny that you're going, oh, maybe people say you're running away from your problems. I feel like you're moving energy forward.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like that to me makes sense. And I almost feel like, thank goddess that you found that you were
Yeah.
able to, because there were some dark moments in this book, which you were very honest about. And those that have had, loss, should look into this, read it, and see that they're not alone. And I know everybody does something a little different, and we don't know what that looks like, as you
Mhm.
probably didn't either. But you knew like there was something, and I'm sure Layla was like, "No, you're not, no, you can't, you're not sitting there and like crying and going into the dark. You're not doing it." Like,
Yeah,
you're not like, and then you're like, "No, I am."
exactly.
And so, but then, it's so hard when we have tragedy and trauma to find where we exist in a way that feels whole and pure,
Hmm.
even though it's there. But this is where I feel like grieving and trauma and loss, we just have to show up for each other, right? And it
Hmm.
sounds like you've joined not just the running, but even other organizations, right, to
Yeah,
honor. And how is it? What is the honoring of Layla besides the book? Is there anything else you feel like sharing?
yeah. I've been involved with a nonprofit that I write about in the book. That was one thing that also really helped. I went to the retreat. It's called Returns of Zero Hope, and I went to a retreat. Really got along well with the owner and the other workers there, who helped facilitate the retreat. And then when I was asked to lead the retreat for their next one, it was in New York, kind of near Woodstock. And it was just such an honor that I think I wrote, I never thought I'd be a role model griever. But for
Mm,
people to actually kind of see me on the upside and seeing me, um, not only living with my grief but helping others, it was just such an honor to be asked to do something like that and hold space for people who really are going through that hard, heavy, dark period. And since then, I've been leading writing workshops with them and showing other families how to write their story. And it's just something that I really hold special because kind of another benefit of getting her story out there is showing others how to write theirs. So definitely feels like a very rewarding thing to do.
yeah, and that is a big deal because I'm sure a lot of women want to write their story, or even
Mhm.
men, but they're maybe not sure how to begin or what that looks like. And it doesn't mean they have to share it with the world. They could, right? I mean, that's the piece, but actually just getting that creative outlet, that expression. Um, I'm wondering how, like, you perceive Layla, like, what does her energy share with you? Like, I can perceive her energy a little bit. I'm curious.
Yeah. So the last time maybe I've seen her in a few dreams, but like she was a baby. I don't know if it was more related to like I'm not sure how to describe it. Like maybe like some lost memories. So I think like I had some dreams of her and they seemed more like nightmares almost where I
Mm,
was looking for, but then once I realized it's Layla, I'm happy. But I had some of those like that, and I do have some nightmares throughout my book too, as well as the good dreams. So sometimes I still get those, but well, the last time I saw her was at that Return to Zero retreat, and I like saw her growing. I realized then like she's not a little baby anymore; she's a 2 year old,
oh,
and she was walking over to me, and I was like, oh, she's a toddler. Like I never thought to me that like she would grow from like a baby to a toddler, from me like how I would see her. So now she feels like very wise. Like when I
mm,
think of her energy, it feels like there's parts of me like I'll have my bad days, but I feel almost like we uplift each other. Like we're
mm,
um like she when my grandmother recently passed, I felt like she was helping her, like leading the way. And it felt like she has like similar to I, like how we're in this phase of helping others. It feels like she's also out there and a source of comfort for not just me, but for other people too. My sister has a good connection with her, and so does my sister-in-law,
oh.
my husband. So like we all feel kind of uplifted by her.
May I share how I perceive her?
Yes, please.
I perceive her. I feel her coming into my side more and more, and I feel her like she's very peachy pinky to me, and she likes glamour. She's a
Yeah,
glamour. Yeah,
she
like
loves
dresses
to,
and like shiny
yeah.
shoes, and she even showed me a little bit of ballet.
Yeah.
And then she's connected to her sister Ashanti very much so, and I feel like you know that.
Yeah.
And how old is am I saying her name right? Ashanti, am I saying that right?
Yep. Yep.
How
That's
old is
correct.
she now?
She is two. I keep wanting to say older because she acts older. But she is
Mm.
22 months. She's
Oh my
turning
gosh,
20.
she's still like barely a baby.
Yeah.
That's very young. Yeah. And I feel like when children are younger, they are more in between worlds, right? It's very easy. It's very
Hmm.
matter of fact. Even, this is this is the spirit baby medium right now because I'm like, that's why I ask you permission. I'm like, am I just gonna read? Am I gonna hear? Because I hear things. I
Oh yeah.
actually feel like the two sisters play together with a little puppy and a kitten. They're like really connected to playing animals together. But she's also has like Layla has a lot of she's funny. She's like she has like a humor about her too, and so she's like she'll crack a joke or two. Some kids I feel like some energy souls are more like funny and comical, and some are not.
Mhm.
Some just aren't. But it's beautiful that your whole family is in connection with her in different ways. And it sounds like you're a dreamer for sure. But
Mhm.
you're a very strong empath too. You probably feel a lot of energy and a lot of her energy. And I love this. And so one of the things that come up, and yeah, I'm not going to give too much of the book away, but I know people are going to be like wondering, like, it is a book for Layla. It's not about Ashanti, but I think we're kind of rooting, right? In the book going, where's the next, like, where's what was the idea of that conversation? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. So, one thing I also wanted to say when you said Layla likes glamour, my sister had a dream that Layla was playing dress up with my great grandmother.
Oh, I love
Um,
it.
and she put on red lipstick and kissed my sister's hand. So like we always think of like lipstick with Layla, like she loves to play dress up and stuff like that in dreams. So I had to say that. But
Yeah.
so one thing I wanted to do in the book was I know that when I was in that dark place having a really hard time, I was getting triggered by some of the books when they were talking about the next baby.
Yeah.
Um, so I felt like I wanted to added in there very like sentence or two where it felt like digestible for someone who might be maybe having trouble conceiving, or maybe they aren't able to have a rainbow baby. So I wanted to kind of weave it throughout there where I was kind of going through this experience, but I didn't want to end with the birth of another child.
Mm,
So I switched the ending. Originally I did, but I was like, you know what, there's other happy endings too.
yeah.
And I wanted to acknowledge that, you know, whether or not things work out with the next baby, like there's still a happy ending for those who might not be able to have another child. Part of that too was we waited a while, then we were having trouble conceiving, and I was like, I will write a separate book about the rainbow pregnancy, which I've been working on. But I wanted it to be separate just for, they're very different types of stories. And um, I wanted one for, readers to want to read more maybe, and also have like their own separate spaces. I feel like my daughter probably wants a book if her big sister has a book. So I've been working on that.
I
Um,
love that, and I want to promote you because it just inspired me when you were saying that we see a lot of books. I say we, like maybe more than just me. But what would that be like to have a book on the pregnancy journey after loss? It's got to be so. I know it's intense. I work with a lot of people throughout the years. Like having that story, and still, of course, I'm going to say still bringing in spirit baby communication.
you
So
bet.
like you more, even I want more. I feel like I want more of the baby communication in the second book. I feel like you have it. You want to do it. And I almost feel like I'm telling you this because you already know it. I'm
Yeah.
just going, you got this. Do it.
Well, even hearing how you interpreted Layla and how you were like seeing her energy, like that's definitely something I want to tune into more because I think she does have a dynamic with Ashanti, and I'm like, what are these two sisters doing?
Oh
So I think
yeah, they're
like
very connected for sure.
me being more open to seeing some stuff, I think I would love that. So that's definitely an intention I want to do, and I
Can I
love hearing
share
that.
can I share something else?
Yeah.
A little bit exposing live on the podcast. Layla talks about a little brother.
That's so funny you say that
Yeah.
because I don't know if you get the sense, but the little brother's going to be a troublemaker.
Oh yeah, probably.
Yeah. I've been connected to this little boy energy since before Layla. In the book, I talk about how I felt like things were going wrong in the
Mm,
pregnancy when I realized that the gender went from being a boy to being a girl, just in my
mm,
mind. Like this was in the shower.
yeah,
It's like, oh, the gender's just switched.
yeah.
Because I was convinced I was having a boy at first. And I think it's that boy who's been coming through. And I did talk to a medium about it, and she's like, oh, there's, the boy energy. He's going to be very difficult. I'm like, I know. Like, I
Wild
think,
spirited boys, we got those. But here's
yeah.
the thing, and the only reason why I say a little boy is because Layla, and I really do trust children of light, they actually tell me about their siblings. And
Mm,
so I'm just sitting here connecting with your energy the whole time. And then, not to be a psychic spy, but I felt like you're okay. She brought a little boy forward. I was not expecting it. And she's like, here's my brother. I was like, okay. I'm like, should I tell your mom? Does she already know? What are we doing here?
yeah,
And
it's
so
just
there
me
is,
doing
yeah. And so Layla she's like the in-between of energy for sure. And
it.
I do feel like this is where when children are born after loss, not every experience is going to be good, right? But a lot of the times I do feel like that connection with Layla especially, it's like she's helping that in-between energy. So with Ashanti and then with her brother at some point, but
Hmm.
she brings them forward. So there's a connection. And the beauty is, some people will ask me, well, do I need to connect with, like, let's say you were pregnant. When you were pregnant with Shanti, like Layla's energy was there, so it can be overpowering. And I
Hmm.
tell people it doesn't really matter. Like because that firstborn, especially, or the one through loss, and a lot of times it can be firstborn, but like she's the firstborn, like she's, in a sense, right?
Hmm.
Like she's your first child. And so
Hmm.
she's kind of the matriarch. No, I mean, just kind of like, she's setting the tone and energy to be of service to your other children that are coming into creation with you. And so maybe there'll be a third book for him. Who knows? It'll be a nice collection, a nice collection.
Thank you.
I love this. Well,
Yeah.
we're coming up to the end, and any
Thank you.
final words and anything you want to share to those out in the world that are just hurting and confused and
Yeah, I'll say that I left it all on the pages there, and there were times where, I was embarrassed to share that there's a scene where I called the suicide hotline, and that was probably the hardest scene to share because I was like, what are people gonna think? It was just such a personal experience, but it felt so important to share everything completely unfiltered. And I just hope that everyone knows that they're not alone, that the dark moments you're going through, they're very hard. And, I left it there on the page that, it's just extremely difficult. But there is ways to get back. Um, and it looks different for everyone, and you'll make choices on what feels good for you and what doesn't, but that I believe in you. So,
hmm, beautiful.
thank
Well,
you.
thank you. I want to call you Layla. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. Like, you
I
can call me
know,
Leah
Leah,
anytime.
Layla, like, yeah, it was so wonderful having you, and I'm so glad we connected to share your book. And so everybody knows, tell everybody where they can order your book at.
Yeah, so the book is available pretty much everywhere. If you have a local bookseller that you like to go to, you can request Layla Held for a Moment there. My good friend owns a bookshop called Ida's Bookshop, and she stocks signed copies.
Mm.
So those are available as well. It's called Ida's. Amazon is available pretty much everywhere. If you don't see it in your bookstore, again, you can request a copy, and you can also request a copy at your library as well. So,
Oh, that's an excellent idea. Get it in our library. Let's get this information out, and that women and families are not alone. And even this is good for if you are a birth center, birth workers, keeping that in the library for sure.
yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you, Leah, for sharing Layla with us all.
Yeah.
This was really wonderful connecting. I
Thank
think
you for
that,
the reading. I'm gonna
yeah.
maybe book you sometime to do a
Yeah,
little
thank you for
more
being
deep dive.
open and like letting it move. I was like, do I keep this? Do I hold it? I want to share the love because I feel her, she's very beautiful and
Thank
her
you.
energy is gorgeous and just such a frequency. And so, you'll keep, expanding with her, your whole family with this journey together and what next unfolds. But yes, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for joining episode 160, March 3rd, 2023, Held for a Moment, A Healing Connection After Loss with Layla.